Okay, so most of you, as I say, hopefully watched my video on YouTube about the skeleton and how dear it is to me to have you see your skeleton inside of you. So, and how it moves, how your skeleton moves and the connection one has to the other. So one of the things that we have you do in these lessons is pay attention to movements of your pelvis and its relationship to your spine. Now I'm going to move this guy's arm away from you so that you can see the spine the best we can, and maybe we can even come up to it. And there's the lumbar area, right? And here's the pelvis as it's lying down. And here are your legs, as you can see. So I'm going to bend one leg, and there you can see the hip joint. It's pretty free. How many hip joints? Can you imagine your hip joint to be that free and that open? Well, probably not. But then you can start to look at how the foot is, and that's the calcaneus, and this is a foot that sort of turns in. So the weight is more on the outside of the heel rather than on the in, or the outside of the heel would be probably that way, but whatever. The point is everybody's going to have a different position. So whatever we say, when we ask you to pay attention to variations, this is part of the process, is to see where your heel is, where your foot is, and how much weight goes into the heel, how much weight goes into the ball of the foot. And then where is the knee in space? Some of you have a hip joint that can only do that. So therefore, maybe it would be more comfortable for you if you put your foot a little bit further out. Some of you might have a hip joint that wants to go way in. So maybe it would be more comfortable having your foot in and even turn it. So no matter what perfection tells you, we're looking for your perfection, not for anybody else's perfection. Okay, so the point is here, when we ask you to bend your knee, we want you to feel that space inside that hip joint. We want you to see the relationship that if the knee goes out, the hip joint rolls. If the knee goes in, the hip joint rolls. And there's a weight shift in the foot as well. And that is one relationship that's very easy to find out. Now, if you pick your foot up, of course, the ball is happening inside the socket, and that one you know. And then there's the idea that the foot could rotate in, it could rotate out, and notice how it's not happening in the knee, it's happening in the ball inside the socket. So all of that is interesting to me and hopefully becomes interesting to you. So one of the things we ask you to do is to roll your weight in your pelvis over to the other side, right? And we have the foot bent so that you're standing. And we have it often when you say tilt the knee to the side or roll your pelvis, there's many different strategies to do that. And one is to push with your foot and to lift here, maybe from your abdominals, and so on and so on. And what we're looking for is how do we mechanically make it more efficient? So our whole idea is when we've got this idea of pressing the foot into the floor, do you just press it? Or can you, this knee, the top of the knee, start to move out over the foot? And if you start to see how it moves over the foot, you start to feel there's already a roll. There's a lifting. So the hip joint almost finds space, but then with that, there's a little tug that goes through the hip joint and allows it to turn. Now that's especially happens easily if, again, the thoracic area is willing to turn too. So when we ask you to roll your weight in your pelvis, some of you might just tilt your knee inward, and then the pelvis will roll, but then there's more tendency to want to rotate through your lumbar area. Whereas when you do something like this and just think of lifting and pulling on the lumbar area enough so that the rotation starts to come from the thoracic area. Now that's, again, can only happen when the ribs and those muscles that hold the ribs as a cage start to soften. So that's one interesting area for me. If you think of lifting from your thoracic area, leaving your shoulder blade back, but just feel this area lifting, then you can start to feel that there's a full action in throughout the whole skeleton that helps you then roll your weight in your pelvis. Again, we're looking for a distribution of effort, which is what's going to give us the effortlessness, even when we're lying on our back. So we're lying on our back so that we can start to experience that effortlessness. Right. I'm going to do the other side now because there's also something that's interesting to me and hopefully to you. And that is, okay, we have this leg straight. So now we're going to bring this leg up and we're going to see what it's like to, again, think of pressing that foot in gently, like it's a sponge. So you're going through, you take your time for the weight to go through to your foot. You're lifting your pelvis and look, see how it easily rolls? And then nice and easily come back. But then there's another thing that we often ask you to do, which is to turn your leg out. And by turning your leg out, I don't know, once hopefully you experience this in a lesson, the turning of the leg out pulls the pelvic area over. So just by turning your knee out to the side a little bit, letting the out top of the foot slide up, pulls the pelvis. So once that starts, if you can initiate the movement from here, then your pelvis is already pulled, and then a little bit, just a little bit, and then you press into this foot. It's so much easier. And then you start to feel all that space happening in all the vertebrae. That's what we're looking for. That's one of the things that we're looking for, is to have variations so that you can initiate a movement from many different parts. Once you realize there's a relationship of one to the other, and you begin to sense that relationship. So I'm hoping that this visual helps you come back when you do these movements. It comes back to helping you be able to sense it. So the visualizing of the skeleton is, to me, is makes things more interesting and makes it more relevant to what we're trying to do, which is to distribute the effort throughout your whole self and to use the skeleton as a sense of support and a sense of action, actually. So when we start to go like this and we start to think, oh, look, this vertebrae here can rotate a little bit, especially if these ribs soften, and especially if we can leave the shoulder blade back so that we can almost arch this little thoracic area back in here. So that's my little skeletal